Jelly is looking back over his life, and he's not feeling like he was blessed necessarily. Hey Black Stars, I'm back with another review. This time we're doing Jelly's Last Jam, which is a revival of the 1992 musical, and it was performed at New York City Center. We're dedicating this episode to Luther Henderson, and while all of the music in the show is by Jelly Roll Morton, who the show is all about, Luther Henderson is responsible for doing the musical adaptation. So he took all of the songs that Jelly created, and he was the one who really made them into the show. We're gonna pour a little bit out for Luther and his contributions not only to this show, which I learned about at the show, but also to Black art in general, which I learned by doing my own little research. So let's get into Luther Henderson. First and foremost, he was married to a Hampton girl. And I mean, we could give him a shout out just for that, but we won't. He did a little bit more. So Luther was married to Billie Allen, who was an actress herself in both film, TV, and theater. The thing I like most, besides the fact that she went to Hampton, is that the concert that the famous Black opera singer Marian Anderson gave, the Daughters of the American Revolution blocked her performance and she had to go perform outside at the Lincoln Memorial. Well, Billie Allen was there as a kid, and I'm sure that had an impact on the kind of performer that she became. But she was in the original cast of Raisin in the Sun, which we talked about before when we got into Lorraine Hansberry. She also helped found a writer's workshop that would go on to feature Ntozake Shange, and she was in the opening sketch for Eddie Murphy's Raw. So depending on what level of culture you're into, I feel like Billie has a little bit for everybody. Together, Luther and Billie had a few kids, but one kid I want to talk about for a moment, her name was Melanie, and she was on the show The Electric Company. I'm a 90s baby. I was a Sesame Street kid, but before Sesame Street, there was this show called The Electric Company. I can't speak too much about what happened on the show, but apparently the two shows were fairly similar. Sesame Street had licensable characters, and so that's why it took off, because they could make some money off of it. But cast members for The Electric Company included Bill Cosby and Morgan Freeman. I'm not going to say anything else about that. I'm just going to leave that with you, and you can do what you want. But the daughter, Luther and Billie's daughter, she was one of the kid cast members of the show, and she played the guitar. So cute. And as I was deep diving into Luther's life, his wife's life, his daughter's life, I want us as a community to get connected again. We have even more tools for connection now than they did back then. I'm talking about the internet. But I feel like in so many ways we're even more disconnected. We don't realize the resources that we have in each other and the ways that the people you know, the people you went to school with, the people you grew up with, they're working on something, right? And you could be working with them. Which leads me to my point about Luther Henderson. He grew up in Sugar Hill, right down the street, and he went to school with Duke Ellington's son, Mercer. And so when Luther got into music, he already had this pre-professional relationship with Duke Ellington, one of the greatest musicians of all time. And he would go on to work with Duke Ellington when Duke Ellington was doing his Broadway show. He also worked with Billy Strayhorn, and he worked on over 50 musicals. Luther, doing music, this was his thing, and he was really, really good at it. The music that he adapted for Jelly's Last Jam was nominated for the Tony Award for Best Original Score in 1992. I wasn't eligible to vote, still not eligible to vote for the Tonys. I don't know how this happened, but they lost the award to another show called Falsettos that I've never even heard of. And I want you to know this original score, you can listen to it on Apple Music, Jelly's Last Jam, I'm playing it right now, Jelly's Last Jam, 1992 original Broadway cast. But I want to say thank you to Luther for his work not only on this show and the other shows that he worked on, but also the way that he connected with other people, and the way that his wife connected with other people, and the way that his daughter was connected to other people. And I just think it's a really beautiful example of how the Black family is very rich in resources. So thank you to Luther. We're dedicating this episode to you. Context is everything. People always want to know, well, how did you hear about this show? I didn't hear about this show. I heard about this show because I get the mailers from City Center. All you have to do is buy one ticket one time, and you will end up on the list, and they will send you mail. Me, you can't reach me via email because it's so much in there, and I'm trying not to shop right now, so I'll just scroll right past your email. If you send me a piece of mail, the way all of these theaters do, I am inclined to read it and to see what's going on at your theater, at your venue, whatever. I go to City Center every year to see Alvin Ailey. This past year, I took a bunch of people for my birthday, which was beautiful. I also go for Fall for Dance, and this April, I'm looking forward to seeing Dance Theater of Harlem at City Center. But they sent out a notice saying that one of their encore presentations would be of Jelly's Last Jam. Now, I didn't know really any of what the show was about, but a friend of mine was like, hey, let's go see Jelly's Last Jam, and I'm always down to see a show. So I really went in knowing nothing, which is one of my favorite ways to go see a show because then I'm always pleasantly surprised. When we looked at the calendar of dates to choose from, there was like a community night where there was going to be live music and drinks, and you could hang out in the plaza. But I wanted to go on Black Theater Night. There wasn't going to be any drinks, wasn't necessarily going to be any music, but I'm like, what's Black Theater Night giving? Let's go check it out. And it turns out that Black Theater Night means that there was a talk back after the show with the writer, the director, who's Robert O'Hara, who directed Slave Play, we've talked about him before, the conductor of the evening, and the songwriter. I feel like I got so much insider information as a result of staying for the talk back and going on Black Theater Night. And it was pretty black, which is so nice. The only thing that made me a little sad about Black Theater Night is that it was scheduled for the second to last night of the show's run. I would have loved to see this show again. But by the time I saw it, the run was basically over. I didn't even have a chance to regroup and take more people. So sad. But in the talkback, I did learn some things I want to share with you all. The original writer for the show was August Wilson. There are a lot of things that happened. They didn't go into detail. August Wilson was not the person who ultimately wrote the finished version of the show. And the show shifted to a musical. Now, August Wilson, he's darker, he's heavy, he's family drama. That would have really changed the way Jelly's Last Jam is presented to us. But because of the work of the writer and also the person who did the music, Luther Henderson, we got a very joyful and uplifting version of a story that could have been told in a very dark, almost devastating way. And that's what I want to focus on first when it comes to the context, because I feel like you have to know this or I should say, if you know this, you'll develop a greater appreciation for the show. Jelly's Last Jam was written by George C. Wolfe. I Googled him during intermission because I was like, who wrote this? This is magic. So George C. Wolfe, he writes for film, he writes for theater, he writes for television. He could write anything. And anywhere he can write, he can direct. He's a one-man show. Also, listening to him speak, highly entertaining. He really is a one-man show. Other things he's worked on, he wrote The Colored Museum, also won an Obie Award. We've talked about Obie Awards. And he did an adaptation of 3 stories by Zora Neale Hurston, so woohoo. Jelly's Last Jam alone got 11 Tony nominations. It didn't win them, which I think is unfair. Although I wasn't there to see the other shows in the category, but it got 11, which is a lot for a single show. He also directed Lackawanna Blues, which was on HBO, and I need to watch this, but I'm gonna just tell you who's in it, because I think then you'll realize you need to watch it too. Mos Def, Macy Gray, Terrence Howard, Delroy Lindo, Carmen Ejogo, Esapatha Murkison. The cast alone, I'm like, what did you do with these people? You could do anything with that group of talent. He directed Denzel Washington in The Iceman Cometh when they did that on Broadway in 2018. To me, he can do anything. And I really think his reputation precedes him because the audience was significantly Black. Like his reputation, the reputation of the show, I think it brought out a really great crowd. It was so nice to experience the magic of this show in community that also was appreciating that magic with me, which I'll get to in the My Thoughts section, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. George also said he's working on a book. I don't know if he was joking or he was being serious, but let me tell you, when the book comes out, I feel bombs will be dropped. Imagine if there was like a Cat Williams in the theater, like the Black theater space. I think that's what George C. Wolfe's book would be giving, based on the way he was talking and the kinds of truths he was telling during the talkback. So stay tuned for George's book. I might have to do a review of a book just for him, just for George. So that's how I heard about the show. That's one of the things that I think makes the show really, really special. And I'm just so happy that George is still with us so that he could tell us about this show that he wrote. And we could all still enjoy the impact on jazz that like Jelly Roll made on jazz, and also that this show has made on Black musicals. A summary of Jelly's last jam. This one is tough only because like I don't like to do spoilers, but this is based on a true story. So if you know anything about Jelly Roll Morton, you know exactly what's going to happen in the musical. I'm not going to give all the details, but I am going to tell kind of the story from start to finish. This musical tells the story of the self-described inventor of jazz, Jelly Roll Morton. Not to be confused with PJ Morton, who also plays the piano. I was having drinks with a friend and she misspoke and was like, yeah, it's the whole story of how PJ Morton invented jazz. I said, PJ Morton invented jazz? Like, don't get me wrong. I am a PJ fan. He is jazzy. He can play the piano. But we're talking two very different time periods, and I'm assuming no relation. So Jelly Roll Morton, like PJ Morton, grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. But Jelly Roll, because he was Creole, he was very separate from Black people. If you don't know that much about like Creole culture, Creole history, you should do your own research. I'm not going to get into that here, but there are implications for the way that his Creole identity impacted the way he saw himself as very separate from Black people, which was a common way of thinking amongst Creole people at the time. So because he grew up very high class and expected to do things that are very French, he received classical training in music. He could, he could play Beethoven, he could do all the fancy schmancy stuff, but it wasn't, something wasn't really clicking. He starts sneaking out to clubs. And I just want to say, I already told y'all I'm a 90s kid. Where I lived in the suburbs and on military bases, there was no sneaking out to the club. Also, like, look at me. I don't know how old I look to you, but I looked young even after I was old enough to be somewhere. So 13-year-old me sneaking into a club, I wasn't fooling anybody. Also, they have the scanners for the IDs. I missed the time period where you could sneak into a blues club, grind on a grown person in the dark, sweaty bop. That was not my experience, but that was Jelly's experience. So Jelly is in these clubs and they told him like, ooh, little Creole boy, you real stiff. You need to loosen up. There's a beautiful moment. You can also hear it in the soundtrack. It's not just in the show, where they tell him that if you just playing the music how it says on the paper, you're not really experiencing music. That's like, waking up in the morning and knowing exactly how your day is going to play out. Music will connect with the listener if you don't know what's going to happen next. And that means even the musician can't always know what's going to happen next. A very nice nugget about improvisation. So he starts blending what he's hearing in these clubs with what he knew from his training. What he is able to create is really like, it's moving for people. They're feeling it. On the side, his Creole family, his like very, stush, uppity, bougie, whatever word they use in your culture, his very uppity family finds out that he's been sneaking out to hang out with these dark people in these dark places, doing dark things, very un-Creole, and they banish him. Which also was like not a thing when I was a kid. You didn't really get banished, right? You get kicked out. But he's banished from his family home and his family no contact. He goes on the road. He starts riding the rails. I know I don't have to keep drawing these comparisons between Jelly Roll's childhood and my own, but there are just so many things that happen in Jelly's life that could not happen for a young person today because the world is a very different place. Anyway, while he's on the road, riding the rails, being a hustler, he makes friends, he falls in love, and he's trying to navigate fame. But all of these things are difficult, right? Even for you and I, making friends, falling in love, navigating, well, maybe not fame, but just navigating life, navigating a professional reputation. He is having to deal with all of that while also dealing with the internal struggle of identity because of his Creole-ness. He is at once Creole and making Black music, because remember, what he learned about music, what makes him special, he learned from Black people in Black spaces. And the way the play frames it is, he denies the Black soul from which his rhythm was born. And he was just the messenger, but he thought he was the message. So the issue is, Jelly is like constantly conflicted in almost a classic tragic mulatto way between being himself and being himself, because he doesn't know who he is, which obviously would make things very difficult. So in the musical, Jelly has arrived in a type of like purgatory. He's dead. The play starts when he dies, and he shows up on a stage to play out one last time reflections from his life. He's guided and he's pushed to be unbearably honest by this character called Chimney Man, who was played by Billy Porter, who was in Pose. And Billy did such a good job, brought a different flavor to the role, obviously, because like Billy is gonna Billy, but it was also very true to the original, like the essence in the character. So Chimney Man is pulling him through this purgatory. We're looking back at his life and coming up to the present, figuring out how he died. And over the course of that journey, this reflective journey, he has to confront his contributions, the ways he is accountable for the troubles he had with his friends, his lovers, his family, and how his prideful actions led to his eventual murder. So I want you to imagine just for a moment that like you died. You open your eyes up, you're not on earth, you're not in heaven, you're in this between place, and it's time to look back over your life. There's a song that's like, as I look back over my life, and I think things over, I can truly say that I've been blessed. Jelly is looking back over his life, and he's not feeling like he was blessed necessarily. He's feeling a little let down and also apologetic. It's a beautiful way to tell a story, starting with death and then going back to the beginning, working our way up. And the Chimney Man, having that additional character, adds a back and forth, a give and take between our protagonist and the truth. Oh, my thoughts on this show. I have more thoughts than should be in this episode. So I've whittled them down to just enough. But if you want to talk more about Jelly's Last Jam, let me know. We could talk all day. The first thing that I'm thinking about is the theater magic of the show. And one of the reasons why I love plays, I love musicals, is because you're playing pretend. And in film, there's so much that you can do with technology that I don't feel like it's playing pretend in the same way that theater is, because I'm watching you in real time. You've got to use smoke and mirrors to confuse me, to misdirect my attention. The way that they were able to use theater magic, stage magic in this show, I found really enthralling. I want to start with the lights. Unfortunately, I did not have what I would consider to be an excellent seat to this show. I don't like to sit all the way up at the top. And you could call me bougie, you could call me uppity, but I just don't like it up there. The one good thing about me sitting up there this time, which I hope does not happen again, is that I could really see what the lights were doing. The shadows were really shadowing. The highlights were really highlighting. And I was sitting, literally the lights were right in front of me. I could see them moving and rotating. And I was like, oh, cool, this is how the lights move. Shout out to Adam Honore for doing some amazing light work, and I'm trying to pay more attention to exactly how lights impact the show, and it was super clear in this performance. The colors, the temperatures, even the tempo at which the lights move. Thank you, Adam. There was a sex scene, and as soon as I saw it, I knew who did it, and y'all know who it is too. It's our girl, Ann C. James, on the intimacy coordination. And another fantastic job. Way to go. We're rooting for you. This next one, I have a confession to make. I typically, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this, I don't like tap dance. I feel like when I watch people do it, they're like herky jerk. It feels awkward and it makes me uncomfortable. But the tap dancing in this show, I could get jiggy with this. It was fluid, right? Shoulders relax. They not up here on you, right? They're down here. And I felt like I could feel the beat of the tap dance. Usually when people tap, I'm like, oh, what? Now, wait a minute. Where's the 5, 6? Sometimes I feel like the tap is on the 1, 3 and I'm on the 2, 4. Maybe it's me, but not in this show. In this show, I really was like, ooh, okay, I see you. And the tap dance was choreographed by Dormisha Taps. I follow her on Instagram now. You can find her too. She did a phenomenal job with the tap dance, because if I, as a person who doesn't like tap, want to see more tap as a result of this performance, I got to give it up to her. I got to give it up to Dormisha, because she really did her thing. So shout out to you, sis. I will be staying tuned. And the final example I have for theater magic is there's this scene with a pool table. Or I should say, there is no pool table, but they are playing pool. You don't even need the pool table because of all that the actors are doing with their bodies and the stick, right? The way that the billiards game is being narrated through song. It was so cool. Like, how do you play pool without a table? They figured out how to do it. Theater magic. My next thought is about the tragic mulatto trope. There's nothing wrong with this trope. It's useful, and I'm sure it is related to people's real lives. Specifically, with Jelly Roll being Creole, it reminds me of another show that also explores kind of the Creole Black dynamic. There is a show called Once on This Island, which takes place in the Antilles. There is the same kind of separation between light-skinned European people and people who are Black and African, the people who have been mixed up and the people who have not been mixed. And there's a clear socioeconomic divide that, like, once you're mixed, you're a part of this upper echelon. And if you're not mixed, you got to be down at the bottom. Almost like the caste system in India. I kept seeing the correlations between Once on This Island and Jelly's Last Jam. I feel like Jelly's Last Jam picks up where Once on This Island left off. So let me explain this other show. So in Once on This Island, there is a Black girl named T Moon who lives on the Black side of the island, obviously, because she is Black. And one of the fancy Creole light-skinned people, they call these people the grand homme, the big people, the big man, the fancy man, is joyriding, and he gets into a car accident. And she takes him under her wing and nurses him back to health. Now, the whole time she's healing him, the people from his side of the island are like, where is he? Like, where is Daniel? We're so worried about him. He's like in line for the throne. We need him here. They're looking and looking and looking. Finally, they find him. He is with Timoon. So when the people from the palace go and see Daniel and they see that he's okay and he's doing well, they're like, well, we've got to take you back. And he's like, okay, I'll go back, but I want to bring Timoon with me. Now, the whole time Timoon has been taking care of him, she's also been falling in love with him. And she feels Daniel is falling in love with her too. They have this beautiful love together, and he takes her to the palace. They go out to a ball. He takes Timoon to a ball. Now, Timoon is from the part of the island where you don't even wear shoes for real. So they dress her up, take her to this ball, and she can't do any of the dances that they're doing. But they encourage her to do her dance, right? Dance for us, Timoon. They send her up. She starts doing her dance, which to them is like wild and erotic. They're low-key like clowning her, but she, she's feeling the rhythm, she feels the beat, and she just gets lost in the dancing. Shortly after this ball, Daniel tells Timoon, I can't marry you. I don't know what you thought this was. Very like almost AD and Clay a little bit from Love is Blind. But I don't know what you thought this was, but I actually have been betrothed to this girl I grew up with, because that's just how it works where I'm from. Sorry if you thought something else. I have to actually marry, my own kind. Timoon is devastated, and she waits for him outside of the palace gates. She waits and waits, and she dies there because she's not eating, she's not taking care of herself. She basically dies of a broken heart. And the gods allow her to come back in the form of a tree. And that tree breaks the gates of the palace so that there's no separation between the Grand Dome and the rest of the people on the island. Now, pause there. I mean, that's where the story ends. So pause, stop, whatever. I want you to imagine that Daniel, who does end up marrying another grand Dome like himself, has a grandchild, and that grandchild moves to the U.S. And that son in the U.S. has a son named Ferdinand, and Ferdinand doesn't feel tied to Creole culture because he'd rather be in darker places with darker people. There's something inside of him that has this call, and he meets a tragic end. Ferdinand is Jelly Roll. Jelly Roll, in my mind, is a direct descendant of Daniel. And when I talk to y'all about family curses, when I talk about genealogical trauma, this is what I'm talking about. If you don't live your truth, if you don't get authentic, and if you don't atone, your descendants will pay for that. These are the curses that I be telling y'all about. Get right. Get right. Another thought, the sheer talent of the entire cast. In order to be in this show, you have to be able to tap, dance. These are two different skills. Tap is a skill, dance is a skill. You got to be able to do both. You got to tap, you got to dance. You have to act, obviously. You have to sing. And not only do you need to be able to sing, you need to be able to sing down, because the way the theater was like vibrating with these people's talent, I was honored to be in the space. And I would be hard pressed to find anybody else working this hard collectively on a stage. Like in the last shows I've seen, I haven't seen anybody doing all that stuff at once in real time. So the talent alone that this show requires, I'm floored. And so then I started doing some research. I'm like, well, who was the original cast? Because this cast was great. This cast was amazing. I'm not going to sit down and read y'all the whole program like I did for Sunset Baby. But this cast, let me tell you about the original cast. Let me tell you about the 1992 cast. You had Gregory Hines in the title role of Jelly Roll Morton. Gregory Hines, the one from Preacher's Wife, tapping, which is what he's known for. You had Keith David, Deep Voice King. Oh, his voice is like velvet. Playing Chimney Man. That's Billy Porter's role. Chimney Man doesn't have to tap, by the way. You have Savion Glover, the Savion Glover, as Young Jelly. And they had his original tap shoes in the lobby, and he had signed them. Oh, I have a video. It's on my Instagram. Felicia Rashad. This was Cosby Show time, y'all. This is the 90s. Felicia Rashad, gorgeous goddess, playing Sweet Anita. Ask me where I would go if I had a time machine. Ask me. That might be where I'd go. And another note on the original cast, Mamie Duncan Gibbs was in this performance. She was also in the original cast. It's been 30-something years. Sis still got it. So Mamie, shout out to you. You committed to the bit. And we appreciate that. Speaking of talent and dance and the dancing ability of everybody on the stage, one of the things that I'm so curious about, and that if I really did have that time machine, I would go find out for myself. But you have people in like a swing club, like a dance club in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, all the way up to the 50s, dancing all night long. And I want you to think about like these people's lives, right? Like you had the washerwoman, the train porter, the elevator operator, hotel cook, all stomping at the Savoy. These people did a whole day of back-breaking labor, got clean enough to come to the club, sweat their whole hair out, went to sleep for a few hours, and woke up the next morning scrubbed and dubbed and ready for church. What a life. What a life. Can I just... I feel so blessed I didn't have to live that, y'all. You would have been sweaty all the time. And I don't know what those clubs are smelling like. Ooh. Okay, another thought. People in glass houses. Y'all know, they gotta be careful. This was such an honest portrayal of Jelly Roll Morton. We have, as a society, and I don't just mean Black people, I mean the whole society, we have a bad habit of putting people up on a pedestal once they do something right. And then once they do something wrong, we don't talk about them at all. We just pretend they're not even there, and we call this cancel culture. Thomas Jefferson, for a long time, we just talked about how he was a founding father. Great guy. Monticello, University of Virginia, on the nickel. And then it was like, oh, Sally Hemings, oh, slavery, oh, terrible offenses against human rights. But we still don't talk about that a lot, right? George Washington, Throw them all in there, all the founding fathers. We just talk about the things they did good. Now it's some people out there who have done some bad stuff, and we don't talk about them at all. Now Jelly Roll, he made some missteps. He also made some contributions to jazz. And what I appreciate about this show is that it explores both his contributions and his cancellations, if you will. I want more shows to really explore what they call in this performance the grit with the gravy. You gotta have a little bit of both. Nobody is perfect, so tell the full story. If we made more shows about our heroes that were actually honest, then perhaps we wouldn't have to cancel them. If we stopped people in their tracks when they started doing these heinous things to other people, perhaps the music would be salvageable. But it's the fact that we hold them up on a pedestal, refuse to know the truth about them, listen to their music without thinking about how they use their music and their power to hurt others. That's what makes it really icky to listen to their work. If we could get honest, I think we might be able to better enjoy the art for what it is and really separate it from the artist. Now, to go back to my point about glass houses, if I was George C. Wolfe, I would make sure I didn't have no skeletons in my closet. Because somebody is going to do him like they did Jelly Roll. And they're not just going to talk about all the amazing shows he created, all the talented Black stars he worked with. They're going to be like, you know what George was saying behind closed doors. I just hope George has his house in order. No, I'm going to get my house in order too, because the way they told this story and held nothing back with Jelly, I just hope we can all be as prepared for that day, Judgment Day. My final thought is that pride is nasty work. It is nasty, nasty work. Honestly, you need a certain amount of self-assuredness in order to ignore the haters, right? Nobody has ever done anything great by listening to the naysayers and listening to all the bad and neutral and just flat out negative advice you get from people. You tell people you're working on something and they'll tell you all the reasons why they're afraid for you, which can be so scary when you're trying to do something bold. So you do need a certain amount of pride to say, no, I can do it. I believe in this vision. You don't have to believe with me. I believe on my own, and that's enough. So my question is, at which point does your iced tea, your sweet tea, just become simple syrup? Sugar is useful, but you can't overuse it. Pride is useful, but you can't overuse it. At what point does self-esteem, belief in you, become self-absorption, which is belief in only you? The only thing you think about is yourself. And so I have questions around pride, because Jelly needed it in order to make it on his own once he was banished from his Creole family home. He needed pride in order to create a new genre of music. He needed pride to be a Creole person in these Black spaces, but he obviously took it way too far. Where was the place, where was the moment where if he had just scaled back his pride a little bit more, that life would have gone differently for him? And once you see the show, I think you'll understand kind of all of these different points. You'd be like, Jelly, go right. He would go left. Nah, Jelly, go right. He would go left again. And then he ended up dead. So he really wasn't, thinking it through. But while he was here, for a good time and not a long time, he did make some important contributions to music. So it wasn't all bad, I guess. My review of Jelly's Last Jam. I am so sad that y'all can't see this show. I really do mean it. I'm really not trying to mess with y'all. I'm really sad that you can't see this show. And maybe it's silly that I'm even reviewing a show that you can't see, but I want you to be ready when it comes back. Every once in a while, these shows come back, right? And this encore did so well, I wouldn't be surprised if the show comes back sooner rather than later, maybe even on Broadway with another all-star cast. That would be really something to see. Probably if The Wiz goes well, we'll get Jelly's Last Jam back on Broadway. But it was a short run. It was just an encore. But this was really a show that I'm so deeply, deeply thankful for. And maybe you can already tell, but I am giving Jelly's Last Jam 5 Black stars. Because of the way that it depicts the line Africa to hip hop, with all of these little pit stops in between. There's a moment in the show where Jelly is on the streets of New Orleans and he's taking in the sights and the sounds of this world that he really is not a part of as a Creole. It's beautiful to watch it evolve from like an African drum beat into the blues, into jazz, And that's the story of music. I find that fascinating that we start with percussion and then we add in these layers and we get crazy with the syncopation and we add something to the melody. And that's how we make music. That's how we got to music. That's how we got to pop. So this show does a great job of making that continuum clear. Where will we go next? I'm not sure, but I'm 100% sure that Black people will have something to do with music as it continues to evolve. There has not been a place where I've seen that more clearly depicted than I did in this show. I appreciate the way that this show bestows hero status without sugarcoating. People have asked me, oh, are you gonna go see the Michael Jackson Experience? Are you gonna review that? I probably won't, beloved. Here's why. The Michael Jackson Experience, as far as I can tell, seems to be a musical concert for someone who is no longer around to do the concert themselves. It's almost as if y'all asked me to review Michael Jackson's hologram. Just because the hologram is on Broadway doesn't mean it's within my niche. What I'm saying is, George C. Wolfe and August Wilson, when he was working on the show, they could have just said, all right, we're gonna do a review, R-E-V-U-E, a review of Jelly Roll Morton's music. We're just gonna have somebody come, a few different people play his music just to pay homage. That's not a show to me, right? There's no narrative there. That's not the kind of thing that I would do an episode for. I'd go see it. I wouldn't do an episode for it. And I wish that we did more shows about heroes that really told their story. Now, if the Michael Jackson Experience was biographical, if you were going to give me a musical about Michael Jackson's life, the ups and the downs, in a musical format, incorporating some of the songs that he wrote and performed, of course I would go see that. I'd be first in line. But, the lawsuits are pending. The cases are still open. I don't want to get sued. I don't have anything more to say about this. All I'm saying is it's very special that this show was able to get into the genius of this musician in an honest way that allows us to say we appreciate Jelly Roll Morton and that we have some reservations about the way that he lived his life. It's okay. It's okay to not be perfect. And I think this show really understands that. The combination of Black creativity in this show, and I know I shout out the lights and the intimacy coordinator and also the people on stage who are multi-talented performers, but really from the writing to the music to the musicians, everybody on the stage had such immense talent. And I love, love, love that. And so 5 stars. And finally, I feel this show had an uplifting message for the community. I feel like this show was teaching us that if you can dream it, you could be it. Even if you can't see it, go try to be it anyway. But don't forget about the people who held you down on your way up. Don't get so big for your britches. Don't get all shiny and feel like, oh, I don't need to consort with them anymore. I don't need them. I'm just stepping on them to get to the top. So I think there's some great lessons to be learned about community and collaboration. I'll also add that in addition to the 5 stars, this is something new I'm trying for the 5-star awardees to really set them apart. This show earns 5 stars and a Soul Circus distinction. And the Soul Circus distinction is it's fun, it's almost chaotic, it's a big show. And it just feels so fun and so Black and so whimsical. Soul Circus distinction for Jelly's Last Jam. Where would I go after the show? I tell y'all this every time. There's not a lot of Black-owned places to go in this area of the city, so I don't have a Black-owned recommendation for y'all. If I am overlooking someplace, please let me know. I would love to patronize. I would also love to support and promote. But anytime I'm at City Center, there's 2 places I choose from when I want to hang out, vibe out after the show. If I'm hungry, I go right next door to Milos. You got to bring your coins though. I have a glass of wine and some oysters, and then I'm usually fine. But everything on the menu is great. If I'm not hungry, I just want to have a drink and see the city and vibe out, then I go to PhD Terrace, which is right across 55th Street. Super high floor, amazing view of the city. They have a full bar, you can get whatever you want. So if you want to eat, go to Milos. If you're not hungry, you just want to vibe out, take your date, look cute, go to PhD. You're welcome. Who would I take to this show? Woo! It's a list. People who like jazz, people who need credit, they crave recognition. There's a lesson in this show for them. People who liked Pose because they get to see Billy Porter in another role. people who appreciate talent, who appreciate hard work on the stage, because what these people are doing is not easy. And no matter when you see the show, whether it's another revival, they're going to be working just as hard because the show demands it. People from Chicago would like this show. Chicago is featured prominently in this performance, as well as New York and New Orleans. Anyone who liked the musical Once on This Island, so good, such a good show. Anyone who's been in a toxic relationship, which is just my way of saying, take anyone. Thank you all so much for listening to my review of Jelly's Last Jam. It was an honor and a pleasure to see this show in my lifetime, and I pray to God I get to see it again, maybe twice before I go down into the grave. I hope that you can subscribe to my channel to see more Black Star reviews. I have so many March shows coming up, so follow me on Instagram to see where I'm going, what I'm watching, and then you can keep checking YouTube to see when I get my reviews up. You can also follow me on TikTok, where I do some mini reviews and also clips, sound bites from some of my YouTube reviews. So follow me everywhere, because you never know what I'm going to be doing. Please leave a comment if you have any questions about the show or disagree with something I've said. Maybe you don't think Gregory Hines is good at tap dance. Let's talk about it. Get in the comments. I thank you for watching this, and I hope to see y'all soon on my channel. In the meantime, Black love and starlight. Stay shining, y'all. Bye.